Hi everybody and welcome back. Dr. Johnson here from EdStar Analytics, and this is the fourth in our series of little videos that are designed to help you pass a high-stakes math test. If you are getting something out of this series, please hit subscribe and you'll be alerted when the next in the series is done. And now this video is going to be about using properties. And you might think, oh no, not the properties, I hated those. Because the properties sometimes are taught as like a one-off thing. But we're going to present these in a way that they'll make sense to you and you'll be able to remember them. And depending on which of the high-stakes tests you're taking, there will be questions about the properties. But even if there aren't questions about the properties, a good understanding of them will help you get answers right. Let's just quickly go over the things that we learned in the previous videos. First, check for expired beliefs. Just be aware of them, things that are no longer true. Like addition doesn't always result in a bigger number. Neither does multiplication, because we have new numbers that you didn't know about when you were in elementary school and you first learned how to add and develop those beliefs. Then also, we are going to eliminate subtraction and division from our lives. Change subtraction to add the opposite. And in the context of addition, opposite means two numbers are opposite when they're the same number, but one is positive and the other one is negative. And in the context of multiplication, opposite means the flipped over fraction or reciprocal. And if you don't have a fraction, you've got a whole number, just stick a 1 under it, because you can put a 1 under a number and it doesn't change it. Now you've got a fraction and you can flip it. And once we've eliminated subtraction and division from our lives, you don't need the mnemonic, please excuse my dear Aunt Sarah, for your order of operations, because you don't have the dear and the Sarah anymore, because we don't subtract or divide. So your mnemonic for order of operations is PEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, which I made up, but it works. So these are the properties, and they only apply to multiplication and addition. They're called the algebraic properties. And when you learn them in your algebra book, you learn them, and it actually says that these are the algebraic properties of multiplication and addition. But then for some unknown reason, you don't eliminate division and subtraction. You still have it in your problems, so these properties wouldn't apply unless you are supposed to be changing in your head so that you eliminate subtraction and division so you can use these properties. But I think that's probably one of the reasons why people don't understand the importance of these properties or how to use them. But since we are eliminating division and subtraction, these properties should start to make sense to you. We've got the identity for addition, and the identity for addition is the number you get anytime you add two opposites in the context of addition. And what do you get if you add -3 plus 3? 0. Any number added to its opposite gives you 0. So 0 is considered the identity for addition. The same analogous situation holds for multiplication. What do you get when you multiply two opposites, where by opposite we're in the context of multiplication? So if you multiply a fraction times that same fraction flipped upside down, you're going to get the same thing on top as you get on the bottom, and it's going to reduce to a 1. So anytime you multiply opposites, you get 1. So 1 is the identity of multiplication. And it's also true that if you add 0 to anything, it doesn't change anything. You get what you started with. And same is true with 1. If you multiply by 1, you get what you started with. So you can look at it either way. When you add opposites, you get 0. 0 plus anything doesn't change. And then the property, we have the commutative property, but just think of the root word, because then it makes more sense to you because you know the word commute. Commute means they can move around. Distributive property. Distributive involves both multiplication and addition. So we say multiplication distributes over addition. And that refers to when you've got like a number outside of parentheses and an addition problem in the parentheses. That multiplication of that number distributes over everything in that parentheses. And I'll show you, and then it'll make more sense. And associate, we can move parentheses around to associate different numbers. That's the associative property. This slide illustrates the properties and how they're used. Commute, the commutative property, the numbers can move around. If it's all addition, move them any way you want. You don't have to add left to right. You can move them. Associative property, you associate whatever you want with your parentheses. So to illustrate the associative property, the numbers don't move, just the parentheses do. Now the distributive property, all of these are important, but distributive is really an important one to understand because you use it all the time. Commutative and associative, if you've eliminated division and subtraction, you'll use those without even realizing you're using them. The distributive property you have to know how to use properly. That -3 in front of the parentheses, that's -3 times that parentheses. Distributive property says the -3 distributes into everything in the parentheses. So you've got -3 times the first thing plus -3 times the second thing. The addition problem just gets the -3 times distributing to every part of the problem. So what we're doing when we solve algebra problems, we're just using these properties. You want to get variables by themselves, so you'll have x equals, ta-da, whatever it is, on the other side, so you have to get rid of all the numbers that are over there with the x's. And how do you do that? You just use the properties and you add the opposite of the numbers you need to get rid of to both sides. That turns them into zeros and essentially annihilates them where you don't want them. And if you've got numbers on your variables, you multiply by their opposites and that turns them into ones to get rid of them. All of the high stakes tests have online practice tests. This one here is from the ASVAB. You just Google it and you'll find plenty of practice tests. Some you have to pay for, but there's plenty of free ones out there. So let me walk you through how I solved this. The first row is just the problem itself. I wrote it out from the ASVAB, but then I changed the -2 to plus -2, and I put ones in front of the x's because invisible ones are something that make people have mistakes. There's an x is really a 1x. So put it there so you don't accidentally, a lot of people think, well, there's nothing there, so there was nothing to multiply. No, there's a 1 there, it's just invisible. So I threw them in for your sake because it doesn't hurt to put them in because you might be just nervous while you're taking the test, and those invisible ones are one of the most common mistakes. So I put those in, and then I did the distributive property because parentheses come first. You do that first. Distributed the 3 on the first line and distributed the 5 in there. And that gives me the second line. Now I want the x's on the left and the numbers on the right. And as long as you do the same thing to both sides of an equation, you can do whatever you want. So get rid of that 3 by adding a -3 at its opposite. As long as I add the -3 on both sides, which I did. And I want to get the -5x, or the 5x, off the right-hand side, so I'm adding a -5x to both sides. I did it to both sides, so I'm good. And now, because you've got all addition there, you can do things in any order you want. You don't have to worry about order of operations. Just simplify each side, take your zeros, and simplify the rest. We get -2x equals -6. At that point, you can probably do it in your head. And if you're taking a test, as long as you trust yourself, you could do it in your head or check it. But if not, we need to get that -2 off the x. It's multiplied, so we want to multiply by its opposite. It's not a fraction, so we put a 1 under it so we can flip it. And multiply by -1/2, that will eliminate the number on the x. Have to do it to both sides, and on the right-hand side, you get 3.